Welcome to It's a Grand Life. Did you know that in the United States alone, 2.4 million kids are being raised by their grandparents or other family members other than mom or dad? 2.4 million. It's a Grand Life is a podcast for those grandparents and kinship caregivers who are committed to making a difference for those kids. Grand families are in every neighborhood, every city, tribe, and territory nationwide. If this is you or someone you love, this podcast is for you. Our goal is to offer hope and resources to help you. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us wherever you get your audio podcasts and leave a review. Every new subscriber and review helps us reach others that need assistance. Welcome to another episode of It's a Grand Life. Again, Happy New Year. This is Craig Nash, and you're welcome all of you to another It's a Grand Life. And we are so excited to have you here today. We are talking with an advocate for the Grand family, kinship caregivers here in Michigan. And Lisa Grodsky was our guest last time and talked about how she spent the last 2 decades advocating for the Grand families here in Michigan. And now we're going to find out specifically what has worked in the state of Michigan and what has not worked, and how you at home could get involved to advocate for kinship caregivers in your state. And Lisa Grodsky, welcome again to It's a Grand Life. We're just delighted to have you back. And we wanted to get your perspective on what is it like to be an advocate for kinship caregivers and grand families here in Michigan.
Well, it's difficult to tell maybe an elected official what your story is and how you came to be a parenting grandparent or a kinship caregiver, no doubt. But you always have to keep in the back of your mind, they're going to want to know what they can do for you. They create laws, they write laws, and they hope to pass bills that benefit the citizens of their state, right? And so you want to craft a short 3-minute window of what they could do for you, because the backstories are very important, but a lot of times our elected officials just don't have time. In many states have rallies at their state capitals, and there are some specific ones here in Michigan that a lot of kinship caregivers use as their platform.
Wow.
There is a Michigan Kinship Care Coalition, and they usually have a Kinship Care Dome Day in September, and I'm among the steering committee members of Michigan Kinship Care Coalition. And we've had a successful 3 or 4 Kinship Care Dome Days where we go to Lansing. We do some door knocking. We visit the galleries in the House and the Senate to be acknowledged. We're not as big as some of those other groups that take up the whole east lawn of the state capitol in Lansing. But, look out for organizations that do these types of things for kinship caregivers. The other one, like the Silver Key Coalition, I believe they're called, with the area agencies on aging, they do something usually in May called Older Michiganians Day. And back in 2020, Kinship Care was part of their platform. Every year, the Older Michiganians Day selects maybe 4 or 5 different platform causes, things that they're advocating for older adults. And in 2020, there were a couple of kinship care issues, but of course, what happened in 2020, the pandemic.
Right.
And so the pandemic really stole our thunder, so to speak,
Right.
Those things were discussed with kinship care. I hope they revisit those the things that they were discussing on those platforms, because they are still very much needed and unresolved.
Well, Lisa Grodsky, what would you say are the main causes for grand families or kinship caregivers across our country? What are we looking for when we look to the state or the federal level?
So they really need to know that relatives are the preferred placement of children, that you weren't expecting to take in a relative, but you gladly did so because of the love you have for that child and maybe its parents, and you wanted to do the right thing, and you obviously have maybe a safe place where that child could thrive. A lot of the children come to you with adverse childhood experiences or have experienced some levels of trauma. And
Right.
so being with family and familiarity is very important to these children. However, oftentimes once it's determined that you are a safe place where this child is thriving, the situation may change, and the change may not be evident to the caregiver. A lot of times the children are brought, and this is just testimony from my very support group participants who time and time again say children were brought to them in the overnight hours after a certain amount of time of receiving foster care assistance and counseling and child care. The next step, they were told to get guardianship. They did. And then their things just stopped coming to them. Their benefits ceased. Their caseworkers were not their caseworkers anymore, and they didn't have any understanding of how these changes happened so quickly. And so there needs to be, I think, better communication between those relative caregivers and the child welfare system of what might happen when we make changes to the status that you have with those kids. Because a lot of people don't realize that there will be any changes, and they're often left in destitute. And that's why a community action agency like OLHSA is so important, because we lift people, we educate people on how to survive in these situations of poverty, because many of our participants are retired or looking to retire, or maybe they are on a fixed income already. And it's really hard because that money was really meant for that individual.
Right.
And now they are faced with using their retirement and pension to raise 1, 2, 3, or more children. And oftentimes they are just over income to be eligible to receive some state benefits. And they're not looking for benefits to help them, but to only help the children.
Right.
Help feed them a little better, but it's tough for them.
And, Lisa, I talk to folks from all over the country that are in the situation that my wife and I are in. And I was talking to a lady from North Dakota last time at It's a Grand Life. And she was explaining to me that her husband, talking about things change, he was going to work till he was 70 to offset the cost of raising their grands. And we kinship caregivers will do whatever it takes to make sure that our kids are okay and that they can have some sort of normal life. And you talked about adverse childhood experiences. Well, those ACEs, they're tracking childhood trauma. That's such a big issue. I know in the state of Michigan, I'm sure across the country, that there are groups that study what are the effects of adverse trauma on young people, because they can take that data, as you know this, and that can track what the incarceration percentage is going to look like down the road and things like that. So the work that is being done by kinship caregivers is so vital to the health and well-being of our country. And you just mentioned a situation that was kind of a bait and switch that I think our listeners need to know about. If you have a child in foster care, there's all sorts of benefits. Now, there's some negatives to foster care, but there's counseling that's covered and other things. But once you make the switch to becoming a guardian, a lot of those benefits go away and they become a fee-for-service item. But that doesn't mean that the family or the child doesn't still need that counseling and those benefits. That's very sad that happens. And that's something I'm really hoping we could see change, because a lot of folks I talk to, they don't have resources for counseling. And yet there's just such a need. In fact, one of the grand voices I chatted with out of Colorado said, we have a behavioral health nightmare right now. We've got we're so far behind on the need for behavioral health specialists, and yet the costs of these wonderful caregivers or providers is very expensive for the average kinship caregiving family. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, yeah, because a lot of them are returning to work if they're retired. They're trying to find better work if they're still working, or they're on a fixed income, whether it's disability or retirement, Social Security. And it is very tough for them to get along. This isn't the way they thought they would be spending their time and money retiring, but life does throw us curveballs, and we deal with those
Right.
curveballs. And that is a very great way to advocate. A lot of people don't realize it is very easy to find out who your state legislators are, legislators are. You can email them, you can phone call them, you can fill out a form on their website. And most of the time they have an intern or staff person that will reply to you, and you can set up a meeting. You can go to your state capitol and knock on their door. You want to make sure they're there. They also offer a lot of in-district opportunities to talk to them about your needs, your family's needs. And believe me, if you have that need, you would not only be speaking for yourself, but for a great number of other people who have the same exact needs, who aren't talking at a coffee chat or, a local library with their legislator about what your particular needs are. Because I assure you that there are dozens of other people, and it's nice for them to know who in their districts have these challenges and how they can help.
That's absolutely a great idea, and I would like to see if you and I could get a couple of our legislators on the show, and we could ask them those things as part of our podcast, what they're doing to support grand families. But you were involved, and your wonderful colleagues at OLHSA were involved in a study called Grandparents Raising Grands. You were on the study committee, and you looked at this whole situation here in Southeast Michigan. So what did you learn from that study?
I think the one thing that I learned is the surprising thing is how many people are actually raising grandchildren. The data on how many people are raising grandchildren, it's not well managed throughout the country, right? I think the best way we could really get some great data is through the U.S. Census. But that's just not happening. You identify a head of household and the members in that household, and you do, have relationships, right? If it's a spouse or a son or a daughter. But when you get into grandchildren, I think it doesn't really say grandchildren. It says adoption or guardianship or foster care, but it doesn't have a subcategory whether those adoptive children are actually relative to you. Because most kinship caregivers are not adopting children because they have enough love in their heart to be a mommy or daddy to another child and raise that child as their own. They're adopting the child to keep them in the bounds of their family and to keep them connected to their community or place of worship. And so and I think that's just a big thing that's missing from our U.S. Census. We could probably do better at capturing exactly how are people related in these households. But I know the formal child welfare systems, foster care, do a great job of capturing these numbers. But all of the other types of kinship caregiving, those numbers are not being captured really well. Those that have guardianships, legal custodies, power of attorney of children, and of course those informal arrangements, verbals with birth parents or just children who are couch surfing or doubling up, as they call it, at a relative's house because it's not safe to go home.
There's not a formal column on that census. They track everything, like what color socks you're wearing, but they really don't identify the issues within the additional members in the family. That's a great idea too. to do that. But the study really looked at what's going on in your service area, right? From a kinship care standpoint, and what should we call this group? I liked how you guys wrestled with that. And you've identified some of the weaknesses or some of the needs for folks in the kinship care community. And I just hope our listeners are aware of that. I don't know if that type of data is available across the country, but it sure should be, because it
should.
Yeah.
Our agency, or area agency on aging, the 1B region, which is changing its names to Ageways soon, did in 2019 a ad hoc study on grandparents raising grandchildren. And, and that was just before the pandemic. Some of those needs have changed, and I hope that we have an opportunity to redo this study in the near future. But you're absolutely right. Studies like this should be conducted across the country. So I challenge any of those area agencies on aging across the country to create a study like this for kinship families, because it really does show how intergenerational families and how children are impacting older adults. And the amount of people that are doing kinship caregiving is just extraordinary. I service 3 counties in southeastern Michigan, and there are over 11,000 parenting grandparents in my service area alone.
11,000. Yeah.
The lucky ones have found us. We're servicing a few hundred every year.
And out of 11,000, I mean, that's it. And I know I've got friends that are involved in Wayne County, and also that includes the city of Detroit here in Michigan. And they're telling me that 25% of every student in the city of Detroit is being raised by a grandparent or a kinship caregiver. It is a huge concern. And so since we're talking about advocacy here, Lisa, what would you want our listeners to know about what they could do to advocate for their kinship caregiving or grand family situation?
Well, validate anyone you know who is currently parenting another relative's children. Celebrate them in the month of September. Contact your legislator. It could be at the local level, like your county. It could be your governor or your senators or House of Representatives. But let them know that you are raising grandchildren and you live in their district. And if you could answer that question, what can I do for you? Then add that to your narrative. Whatever it is specific to your family, something that's important to you. Maybe it was that your child care was cut off when you transferred from foster care to guardianship. Maybe it's another benefit, like having children with high ACEs or adverse childhood experiences, and the lack of resources for an older person such as myself who are parenting again, because I guarantee you weren't necessarily dealing with that kind of parenting challenge when you were parenting the first time.
Correct.
So these are just a few examples of things that you can do to advocate for yourself and who to talk to about those needs, because they are unmet needs for kinship caregivers.
Well, Lisa, you have just really articulated the whole situation for us here, not only in Michigan, but all across the country. We've got a situation with kinship caregiving exploding. There are 1,400 groups like OLHSA across the country. And for folks here in Michigan that want to get in touch with you and your wonderful team, how do they do that?
So OLHSA's Grandparents Raising Grandchildren phone number is area code 248-209-2721. And you can always visit OLHSA's website at www.olhsa.org. And in the search button, you can type in grandparents raising grandchildren and find all the information there.
It sounds outstanding. Of course, we'll have that at the bottom of our screen when the podcast is aired. But thank you again for being our guest here on It's a Grand Life. I hope you will come back and be a regular, because you're on the forefront of all the changes that are going on to benefit kinship caregivers and grand families. And we just appreciate you so much. And I just hope you know that. Thanks so much for coming and being our guest.
Thank you, Craig.
Thank you for joining us today for It's a Grand Life. It's a Grand Life provides vital content, regulatory updates, and subject matter experts that are committed to supporting the 2.4 million kids and their caregivers from every neighborhood, every city, every tribe and territory nationwide. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts and leave a review. Every new subscriber and review helps us reach others that need assistance. As caregivers, we are united in purpose. We are driven by hope while providing strength for today and hope for tomorrow. We are truly making a difference while living the grand life. If you have a suggestion for a future episode, please reach out to us. But we'll see you next time for another It's a Grand Life. Thank you for joining us.